Yeah, hi, Mudslide Slim here, and today I'm going to be an armchair general. There's too much focus on Taiwan and China at the moment. Everybody thinks there's going to be a war start tomorrow. I don't think that's the case at all. Anyway, hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, and we'll be right back. And I'll show you how China could actually take Taiwan without firing a shot. Okay, so we've got this flashpoint, Taiwan and China. You've got the US sending aircraft carriers down the Taiwanese Strait. The Japanese are doing the same thing. The French are doing the same thing. There's aircraft carriers to burn. There's submarines to burn. There's ships everywhere. Everybody's thinking there's going to be a war and it's going to start tomorrow. Well, I'm going to show you how China can take Taiwan, and there's not a thing that Japan, America, or anybody else for that matter, Australia, could do about it. So let's get to it. Before we do anything, I have to say that I don't have any qualifications as a general, nor anything like it. I'm simply, using common sense. I'm a good old horse talker from way back. And frankly, I've read Sun Tzu's The Art of War. And frankly, I think anybody who has read Sun Tzu and who has looked at the Taiwan situation could realistically come to the conclusion, hey, that would be easy to take without a shot being fired. This is how the Chinese would probably do it. First of all, they would have about 100 agents in Taiwan already. That would probably be a given. Those agents would be the next door neighbour, the person down the road, just somebody who fits in. Nobody who's going to cause a problem, somebody who's nice, the next door neighbour, etc., etc. Now, we need to misdirect attention somewhat. So China would bring in 5 Middle Eastern types. They would go about their business and be touristy and whatever else while they're getting used to the layout of the land there. And then on one morning, the 5 Middle Eastern types would take over the local television station. At the same time, 100 Chinese agents would go next door and take the mother, the father, and the children hostage. Now, nobody has to get hurt so far. We have the Middle Eastern types go on television and say, look, we know there are 5 terrorist ISIS type people here in jail in Taiwan, and this is about getting them out of jail. Now, rightly, the generals at the time are going to think, whoa, this is a bit misdirected attention here. We better pay attention closely and seriously to China. So they're doing it. Everybody's on double guard, focus, sharp eyes, the whole bit. But this television station nonsense goes on for 4 or 5 hours. The Prime Minister's got to get involved. We want those 5 people out of jail. We want them delivered to the airport, and we want a plane supplied so that we can fly to a destination of our choice. Now, straight off you think, oh, well, that would be silly. They'll go to the airport and they'll be caught there with everybody else. That's where the 100 agents come in. They've got 600 or so people hostage right across Taiwan. No particular area, just a broad spectrum area. And while this television nonsense is going on, these agents are calling into a central number to advise who they've got hostage, what the people's names are, what their phone number is, so that the police can actually check and say, oh, well, oh, look, there really is 600 people here and they are hostage. So this is a terrible predicament. The Prime Minister would probably give in and say, look, give them $1 million if they want, let them take the terrorists and fly out, and we'll worry about catching them later. Now, the people on TV are going to say, we want to fly out without any problem. We don't want to be hassled at the airport. We want to be able to get on the plane and fly out. And then after we've flown out, after every hour, one set of hostages will be released. Now, you can imagine if there's 100 set of hostages, that's going to take quite a while to get them all released. But that allows the misdirected attention to work. The terrorists on a plane, who knows where they're going to fly to, got $1 million, and they're all flown out. So it looks like that's been solved. So everybody takes a sigh of relief. Now, have a look at this port here. This is a port in Taiwan that loads and unloads containers. Now, remember, this hostage crisis started about 9 o'clock this morning, and it's probably 2 o'clock by this time. So from this morning until now, the unloading of containers has been going on. And at a given signal, at least 1,000 of those containers will open, and they will contain 6 Chinese soldiers with perhaps motorcycles, 2 motorcycles, and they can, have 2 on foot, 2 doubling, and that's the 6 of them. They've had to stay in this container and live in that container for the last 10 days while this subterfuge has been going on, and so they could, sail into port. But now, out of that 14,000 containers on this ship, 10,000 of them have got 6 soldiers in them. That's 60,000 Chinese soldiers, right smack dab in the middle of Taiwan's biggest city. So they, on their motorcycles, and they race down to the local mall. 5 or 6 of them would take, perhaps 500 people, maybe 1,000 people hostage. But within a couple of hours, without firing too many shots, they've taken like tens of thousands of people hostage. By this time, the Chinese have said to America, look, sorry, you just lost. We've already got Taiwan. Smaller fishing type vessels that the Chinese have in droves would be circling up Taiwan already, and closely followed by warships from China as they come in. The Americans are warned that one single shot in anger against anybody in Taiwan will amount to you basically killing 100,000 people. So go ahead, fire your shot. Don't forget the people in Taiwan are our allies. They're not the enemy, they're our allies. And they're being held hostage. This is exactly the same thing that Trump was up against when he decided he was going to attack North Korea. North Korea's missiles were aimed in such a way that in any way at all that there was an attack, then almost all of South Korea would be obliterated with these missiles. They may not be nuclear, but nevertheless, if you've got 10,000 missiles aimed at Seoul in South Korea, and the US gets 1,000 of them, there's still 9,000 there, they're going to make a big dent in the population. So that's the North Korean standoff. Now, the Chinese, at the point where they break out of the containers, have told the Americans this is what's happened. You intervene at your own risk, because 2 things will happen. 1, remember that North Korean satellite that was put into orbit and everybody laughed because it was spinning over and over and over and over? Remember that North Korea is still in touch with that satellite by radio. The satellite goes over the North Pole, over the South Pole, and over the USA. So the Chinese have, behind the curtains, if you like, asked if they could take over that satellite, because if they detonate that satellite, it contains a nuclear bomb spinning over and over and over. Doesn't make any difference. That would destroy every piece of electronics in the USA. So now the US is forced to think that we've got 330 million people who are going to be without lights, without power, can't drive their car, no petrol pump, the toilets won't work, water won't work, nothing will work, because we've got this bomb that might go off over our head. By the way, China would also be reiterating to America, look, remember 2 weeks ago, we put into orbit a Long March rocket. On its way to orbit, it dropped off another rocket that flew around the world at supersonic speed, ultrasonic speed. You didn't see it until after it splashed down. You have no defenses against it. We have a rocket like that ready to go. If you're going to fire a single shot, we are going to attack mainland USA with nuclear weapons. So the standoff is that there's maybe 100,000 people at gunpoint. The US is facing a neutron-type bomb over its territory, which will wipe out everybody's lives and livelihood. It won't kill them, but nothing electronic will work. Then there's the added advantage that the Chinese have got a missile that could come in from the south, for which America has no defense and cannot defend against. So it's looking pretty grim, isn't it? You've got the US now hedged, it can't move. Japan's not going to move, not by itself. Who else is going to move? Not Australia, that's for sure. So you've got a situation where the Chinese have taken hostages, got some Middle Eastern terrorists released, while the public were looking the other way. 50 or 60,000 Chinese soldiers were released from containers in the docks right smack in the middle of Taiwan, and said, how do you defend against that other than to just a full-on nuclear war? Don't forget, these are our allies. The Taiwanese are the democratic people that we're trying to save here. And if you push any buttons at all, 100,000 of them are going to perish immediately. And you tell me a single politician that's going to push a button and kill 100,000 allies of Australia, of Japan, of the US in one fell swoop and start a nuclear war, which would be mad, mutually assured destruction, because you've got the Chinese with nuclear bombs, you've got the US with nuclear bombs, and by this means, it's pretty obvious that the Chinese would not be willing too much to sort of concede not using nuclear weapons. At this stage, they haven't. At this stage, America hasn't. And so now what we've got is a talk fest. Pretty tied up. This is exactly what happened in Korea. There was a talk fest. Don't forget the Korean War was around about 1950 or so. There was a talk fest, which goes on today even. 70 years later, there still is only a ceasefire in Korea. The war hasn't ended. It's only at a ceasefire. I think that if China did this, they would really be able to say, we've got a ceasefire in Taiwan at the moment. Nobody is going to be damaged or hurt, providing the US, Australia, Japan, and all the others don't do anything. They're not going to do anything because the US showed that when North Korea was plainly able to put like 10,000 missiles straight into the major city in South Korea, no US general was going to push that button and get that to happen. So, if you think about it, Sun Tzu was a very smart man. And if you're a good old horse talker or somebody with a bit of common sense and you sat back and you thought about this could all happen so quickly, all in the space of a couple of hours, it would be done. You've got a misdirected attention where they want to get Middle Eastern terrorists released, so that focuses. But the generals wouldn't be fooled by that because they'd say, oh, this could be China. We'll look over the horizon and make sure none of those planes come any closer to our place. But while they're looking to the left, on the right-hand side is this container ship, maybe 2 or 3 container ships where you've got 100,000 Chinese have come in. It would be the sneakiest way possible to get them in. No shots being fired against the Chinese on their way in. And if you see, all of the preparations for war for Taiwan are to repel a boarding party across the straits. Well, the boarding party came across the straits and they snuck in the back door in these containers. Now you might say, well, how can they all live in these containers for 10 days? Well, obviously, they would cut the floor out of the top container, the top out of the container underneath it, and so by the time they're ready to be released, you've got this complete whole system from the bottom container right to the top container, and, you know, it may take a little while to get some of those motorcycles out, but with that many troops guarding the port, you can guarantee they'll get the motorcycles out. But if they've unloaded, let's say they've unloaded, 1,000 containers from 8 o'clock or 7 o'clock in the morning through to 1 o'clock in the afternoon, when they start to come out, they would have 1,000 to 2,000 motorcycles, plenty of motorcycles to go down to go downtown, plenty of motorcycles to go downtown to the strip malls or the big crowded areas and take hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, even thousands of people hostage. You've only got to have like a group of 20 soldiers who are right close to 1,000 people, and they can certainly hold 1,000 people hostage. All the soldiers in the world can come up and say, look, we'll start shooting. They're going to get hostages before they start to get Chinese, aren't they? You've got cannon fodder of your own people waiting to be shot. They are not going to do it. So I do think that this is a plausible possibility, and I do think if you look at Sun Tzu and the way he writes these things and about how to go about these things, that there may be, sincerely, a way where China can take Taiwan right now. I do think there's a way to defend against it. Why don't you tell me what you think is the way to defend against it? Until next time.